So welcome to How Can Veterans for Peace and Labor Work Together? The Southeast Regional Monthly Zoom Group and Labor Working Group of Veterans for Peace are hosting this webinar. We seek in this webinar to build alliances between anti-war veterans and workers and labor organizations to jointly promote economic and environmental justice and peace and prosperity. We have 4 speakers tonight, and we'll introduce each of them just before they speak. We will also have about 30 minutes of Q&A after the speakers. We hope our webinar will convey the necessity and possibility of building a massive united front for peace, democracy, and prosperity in the U.S. We hope to shed light on which movements will be the core of that united front and how we can go about building it through conferences, rallies, identifying key groups and individuals, etc. As Veterans for Peace supports the economic fights of workers, the struggles of workers, and others for racial and gender justice, for immigrants' rights and well-being, and for democracy, we bring our crucial and respected voice challenging militarism into this united front. Our first speaker is Mark Dimondstein. Mark is the national president of the American Postal Workers Union, which represents over 200,000 employees of the U.S. Postal Service and 1,500 employees in the private sector mailing industry. Mark began his first 3-year term in November 2013 and is currently serving his 4th 3-year term. He's been a leader of the National Labor Network for Ceasefire and a consistent voice for bringing war dollars home and having the basic needs of the working class take priority over the growing military-industrial complex. Mark, take it away.
Well, thank you so much. Good evening or afternoon, wherever you are. Fellow fighters for justice, co-fighters for justice, I really appreciate the opportunity to share some serious and honest thoughts with you tonight, and I'm certainly glad to be here. Obviously, some of what I'm going to talk about are the views of our union, and some of them are my personal views, and I will be sharing both. But first, let me start, since I read the email and you said you did this in May of honor of May Day. Belated happy May Day to everybody, the day of the international working class born in the USA in the fight for the 8-hour day. So it's a good day to recognize, and it's a good time to get together. I was asked to talk about 2 main things. One is the attacks on the public postal service and our unions, and also why we are a supporter of the people over the Pentagon Act and the general policy of bringing the war dollars home. We do have a policy, as the American Postal Workers Union said at our convention. That's the highest authority. In 2016, we passed a resolution called Bringing the War Dollars Home. And the reason's pretty simple. It's the tax dollars of the working class and how they're used. It's workers who are asked to kill and be killed, often in the name of profit, and the multinational corporations and the military-industrial complex. So workers have a real stake in how our tax dollars are being used. The wealthy generally don't pay taxes. Tesla made $2.8 billion and paid nothing in 2023. Bezos pays about 1% on income the last time he paid taxes, and the people that I represent pay between 20 and 30%. So we pay our share, and we should have the say, and the main say, in how our tax dollars are used. And it may come as a surprise to you that I can unite with a president like Eisenhower and a 5-star general, but he put it well when he observed that, and this is his quote, "Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies in the final sense a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and not clothed. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children." Just the $80 billion increase in the defense budget, as it's called, from 2022 to I think just in 2022, there was an $80 billion increase. That increase alone could pay for 873 new higher elementary school teachers, 9.5 million public housing units, and VA health care for over 5 million veterans. So, in a nutshell, that is why our union is on record to bring the war dollars home and use our hard-earned tax dollars for the betterment of society, for health care for all, for living wages for all workers, for a clean environment, for economic and social justice throughout our society. So let me get to the second point. And hats off to all of you who are involved with promoting and pushing forward the People Over the Pentagon Act. And as the reconciliation budget stuff is unfolding, as we're meeting, this military budget this year will likely surpass $1 trillion. While cuts, and I'm going to get into that in a minute, while they're rampaging through government with all sorts of cuts and cutting the needs of the people. But let me first say, I'm not a veteran, but I'm glad to be here with all of you. And I was raised by a highly decorated World War II veteran father, flew 64 combat missions, bombing fascist Italy. And I can share with you proudly that I was raised by a veteran for peace. While he understood that the anti-fascist war had to be fought, he opposed every intervention that this government, our government, made since that time. I was also raised by a father who, against conventional wisdom at the time, always told my two sisters and I that fascism and tyranny could happen here, that it was not unique to one country, it was not a product of one madman, and that we had to remain ever vigilant. Unfortunately, his wisdom, his insights, is here today as we are on a march of tyranny, the type of tyranny that he warned about. So I think as we discuss the attacks on the Postal Service, the workers, and our unions, which I was asked to talk about tonight, we must address it in the context of the political time and landscape that we're functioning in. We're all aware, I know everybody on this call is aware, there is a billionaire coup going on in front of our eyes. The hollowing out of government services, the attack on government unionized workers, not just the workers themselves. By the way, I was looking a few things up. 25% of federal workers are veterans. The attack on the workers, the attack on the unions, the attack on union contracts, the attack on collective bargaining rights, the attack on unions' ability to collect dues, the attack on union time is going on as we speak. With the unelected President Musk, and it doesn't matter if he's going to disappear from the news tomorrow or not, but the unelected President Musk rampaging through government, whether those are service and the services that the people need. We could start, when they talk about firing 83,000 government public servants in the VA system, that's going to deeply affect the rights of veterans and the rights that they had earned. The question of climate, the question of even weather forecasting. Somebody was talking about earlier that they're on the call in a massive storm. The attacks on FEMA. It's not that we don't need any FEMA, we need a better FEMA. They're talking about doing away cancer research, overseeing nursing home abuse, the question of safe workplaces. All of these needed governments, the question of the education department and the support for 15 million challenged children and their special needs children. All of these things are being ripped up. And it has nothing to do with Doge and Doge's claim of government efficiency. It has everything to do with ripping off the public sector, turning it into either destroying it or turning it into a private profit-making machine. Musk himself, this is not talked about enough, the richest guy, at least in the United States, maybe in the world, the largest single contributor to Donald Trump, right? He has $38 billion of known government contracts. He probably has more than that in unknown because of the military character of it. So this is naked self-dealing that's going on, not about efficiency at all. And the attack on the public postal service is tied in to this general attack on federal workers and the needs that they provide to the people of the country. So what's underway now with the Postal Service is a new thrust, probably the most serious and organized attack to destroy and privatize the public postal service. It's coming right from the White House itself, the president itself. It's coming from another billionaire, Howard Lutnick, the Secretary of Commerce. They're talking about putting the post office up on the commerce, which would be illegal, but that doesn't seem to matter in the constitutional crisis we find ourselves in, where there's no rule of law, there's no balance of legislative and executive and judicial branch. However, that balance may not have worked that well for the people over the years, but whatever was there, it's disappearing very quickly. So what's driving the attack on the public postal service? And it goes back to, simply put, and it drives a lot of the attacks that are going on public services and the public commons and the public good in general. But what's driving that is pretty simple. It is Wall Street versus Main Street. And my members get tired of hearing from me on that, but that's the way it is. What else could explain it? The people would gain nothing from turning over a public national treasure, a public institution about to celebrate its 250th anniversary this July. The people would gain nothing from privatization. In fact, they would lose. When you privatize, prices go up, services go down, workers take a beating, and that spills over into our communities, taking a beating as well. So nothing can explain it unless it's about profit. So Wall Street wants the post office, not because they want to serve the people on an equal basis every 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week now, no matter who we are and where we live, what we call the universal service obligation. It's a wonderful small d democratic right. They don't care about that. But what I tell our members now is you don't have to listen to Dimondstein about Wall Street. Wells Fargo, equity investors, put out a report on February 27th, salivating over the new possibilities, the new discussion, the serious effort of these billionaires to pick the pockets of the people and privatize the Postal Service. And so they put out a report to their investors. This is a great opportunity. And they specifically say it's a great opportunity for FedEx and UPS, the private side. They talk about how if the parcel side of the Postal Service, at least if not the whole thing, was privatized, then prices would have to go up on the package side 30 to 140%. They are thrilled about that. In fact, their subtitle is called "All Paths Lead to Better Parcel Pricing." Better parcel pricing for us and the people of the country is reasonable and fair rates. Better parcel pricing for them is how to raise the rates and make the most profit for the investors and to hell with the people of the country. Elon Musk himself was at no other place about a month ago than a conference at JP Morgan. Last I checked, that was also Wall Street. Wells Fargo, by the way, is one of the big four along with JP Morgan. And what did he say there? He said, I, Elon Musk, am for privatizing everything. And he singled out Amtrak and the United States Postal Service. So if I'm not out of time yet, I'll speak. I want to talk about what's going on now with this reconciliation budget process in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill. So the House is about to pass what the president's called a big, beautiful bill. It is big and beautiful for the wealthy. It's big and beautiful. It's going to be big and beautiful for the military-industrial complex. And it's going to be horrible for the working people of this country. the very essence of what they're trying to do, off the backs of working people, is to continue these massive tax breaks for the super wealthy, the uber wealthy, and corporate America. And to get these obscene breaks going forward, they have to attack the working class and regular folks, including veterans. And again, it's in this context where they're also coming after the Postal Service. And when they're not coming after the Postal Service directly, they're coming after the workers. For example, our current workers are now under a retirement system called the Federal Employee Retirement System, FERS. We used to be under civil service. It changed in 1984. FERS is under extreme attack. They want people to pay more, and they want people to have to work longer before they retire. And then on top of that, they want them to have hundreds of dollars less a month in their hard-earned retirement. All that is to try to make sure the Musks of the world and the Bezos of the world and these massive corporations that don't pay taxes, in fact, often get tax money back. They got to try to take it out of the hide of working people. So how do we work together? I know is the subject of your evening tonight. I think we have to work together to push back against any of these reactionary measures and then also fight forward at the same time. So we need to defend the public services, whether it's in relation to veterans, workplace safety, education, the environment, and so on. We do have to defend Medicaid. 72 million people, including many veterans, get Medicaid. Medicaid keeps rural hospitals open all over the country, who are now on the brink anyway of going under. So that's a huge area of, of important defense. Defending education, defending voting rights. I mean, think about the attacks on voting rights can be very subtle, even though they're huge attacks. There's one executive order, or I don't even know if it's been put out there yet or not. I think it has. That women who are voting, their ID has to meet their birth certificate. Well, most women, when they get married, change names. How much more difficult is it going to be for women to vote? Defending the right to protest. The idea that Brother Khalil of Colombia, a legal permanent resident, can be really kidnapped on the street for voicing his opinion, right? We built our labor movement on the right to protest. The question of defending habeas corpus, basic democratic rights, the defense of union rights, the fight to expand those rights. All of these are areas where all of us can work together. The reality is most people in this country and most veterans in this country are working people. And so that need for solidarity wherever the fight is, and not just the defense, that's the starting point. But anytime they get away, they meaning the dictators, when they get away with kidnapping people, when they get away with defying the courts, when they get away with suing media outlets and they crumble, or suing universities and they crumble, things are just going to get worse. And so our fight back is to fight against every one of those and then fight forward. And I've been sharing with our members, and I know probably a lot of people on this call know the quote from Reverend Niemöller. But I think it's a quote that we can't say enough, and we can't think about enough, and then we can't act on it enough in these times. So I'll share it with you, because these times are indeed most unprecedented in my view, and most dangerous. And of course, Reverend Niemöller was a Lutheran pastor in Germany. He was first enamored with the rise of Hitler and the white supremacy, the Aryan race theories, the superiority of a people over another people. And by the way, when my father would say, you know, it could happen here and be careful, it never starts with death camps. It starts with the kind of things we see every day, the demeaning of people, the degrading of people, the deep divisions, right? The Haitian immigrants are eating our pets. Veterans are losers. I'm no particularly fan of the politics of John McCain, but how does a guy like Trump get away with what he did to Senator McCain and his veteran status and his history? So Reverend Niemöller was enamored, but at some point, the Nazis and the fascists came after his church, and he resisted, and for that he was arrested and imprisoned. He wasn't in a death camp. He survived. He was, I guess, in work camps, prison. But when he came out, he shared with us something that's invaluable. So I'm glad he survived. But we also have to be willing, we the people have to be willing to listen to his lesson and his lessons. And what he said was, when they came for the communists, I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. And when they came for the socialists, I didn't speak up because I wasn't a socialist. And when they came for the trade unionists, I didn't speak up because I was not a trade unionist. And when they came for the Jews, I didn't speak up because I was not a Jew. And when they came for me, there was no one left to speak for me. It's a powerful lesson. We're going to have to stand with each other. We can update that quote, right? When they came for the immigrants, I didn't speak up because I wasn't an immigrant. When they came for the transgenders, I didn't speak up because I wasn't a transgender. When they came for women's rights, I didn't speak up because I wasn't a woman. When they came for the disabled children and the disabled people, I didn't speak up because I'm not disabled and I don't have a disabled child. Where the hell is it going to end if we not just we have to start by speaking up and then standing up together and fighting forward for the kind of world we want to live in. And I tell our people, and I think it's important because I think people are rightfully worried. I think people are intimidated. I think people are scared. I think people are confused. And by the way, my own view is that part of what lays the basis for what we have is the fact that working people do not have a political home in this country and we're lost in the wilderness. And we're going to have to find our way out of that, but we're going to do it based on issues. Fighting for health care for all, fighting for good education, fighting for good living wage jobs, fighting for union rights, fighting to organize unions, to continue to build even in these times. Because I tell our members, and it's important for everybody to realize, and by the way, while we may be intimidated, people may be confused and all that, people should be angry. And we got to turn that anger into the fight back. And the time is not hopeless. It's challenging. It's unprecedented. It's dangerous. But it's not hopeless. And we are sure as hell not helpless if we figure out how to organize and fight back. There's a heck of a lot more of us than there are of them. So I appreciate the time tonight to share some honest thoughts. I hope it's food for thought. And it's an honor to be with all of you fighters for justice. And when you come to the struggle for the fight against unjust wars, what better voice is there than veterans themselves, just like my dad was. Veterans themselves that said, the wars that have to be fought are one thing, and the wars that are being fought for the profits of the multinational corporations and for the geopolitical questions of oil and transportation, no way. And the veterans' voice is so important in this fight. So hats off to you. I always think, when I think about veterans, I always think about Smedley Butler, the highest commandant of the Marine Corps, when his famous quote, he said, "I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service, and during that period, I spent most of my time being a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and the bankers." So keep that voice going. All you justice fighters, justice veterans out here, and the people of the country need to continue to hear from you and your experiences. Has been an honor and a pleasure to be able to join you tonight with some of these thoughts. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a great speech. We hope you can stay around for some Q&A, but if you can't,
I will.
oh,
I will.
Good. That's great.
I'll be happy to.
Our second speaker is Roach. Rose is the national coordinator for the Labor Campaign for Single Payer and chair of Healthcare for All, Minnesota. She retired in 2023 as the executive director of the Minnesota Nurses Association after working in the labor movement for 34 years. For over 2 decades, Ms. Roach has been involved in the healthcare justice movement, both as a national speaker and trainer. Take it away, Rose.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Patrick. And it's always an honor to be with President Dimondstein and President Rosen here, both who are affiliates of the Labor Campaign for Single Payer. So the Swiss moral philosopher, poet, and critic, Henri Frederick Amiel, said, "In health there is freedom. Health is the first of all liberties. Since no one understands freedom and liberty better than our country's veterans, connecting health to both seems an appropriate way to begin my remarks tonight." Good evening and greetings of health and solidarity from the Labor Campaign for Single Payer. The Labor Campaign for Single Payer is a single issue organization within the organized labor movement. Our affiliates include a number of influential national and international unions, many of their locals, state federations, and local labor councils. Our primary mission is to increase and coordinate grassroots labor support for a single payer, improved Medicare for all healthcare system in America, because we believe that healthcare is a fundamental human necessity and therefore a fundamental human right, and that the labor movement must help lead in the fight for healthcare justice. From a labor perspective, we know that our employer-based healthcare system is a convoluted mess because we allow our employers to control our access to healthcare. That's nuts. Doing so has resulted in the greatest transfer of our wealth as workers to corporations, causing the bosses to use our access to healthcare as an economic weapon against us in the class warfare that we are all engaged in. It's an absurd way to set up a healthcare system, disincentivizing entrepreneurship and career movement based on the fear of losing access to healthcare. Health is the issue of intersectionality across the justice movement, and protecting public health is something we all have in common. I'm here tonight because the Labor Campaign believes that the correlation between the privatization of the VA is intricately tied to the privatization and corporatization of our non-VA healthcare system, particularly our public health programs like Medicare and Medicaid. As you all know, the Veterans Administration is an institution intended to ease veterans' transition into private life and provide needed medical and psychological care for veterans. You also know that this system is being undermined by profiteering, market fundamentalism, and political dysfunction. The provision for the public care and support of military veterans is one of the oldest federal commitments and can be traced back to a promise in President Lincoln's second inaugural address, where he said, quote, "to care for him who shall have borne the battle," unquote. In many ways, it served as a template for subsequent federal programs that provide important safety net services for all Americans. History demonstrates a clear connection between labor and veterans issues. The GI Bill of Rights, together with the institutionalization of the labor movement and the consolidation of other federal programs providing retirement and income security, has helped give rise to a golden age for many working class and middle Americans, a 30-year period where real incomes were rising and inequality was declining. Of course, the massive racial inequities that defined the immediate post-World War II period ensured that Black veterans were never able to access the full range of services to which they were entitled. This was particularly true in housing, where both formal and informal residential segregation, deed restrictions, redlining, and other forms of financial discrimination resulted in huge disparities between Black and white veterans' uptake of GI loans. Over the decades, even long after those legal barriers were removed, these initial inequities abetted de facto residential segregation, urban decay, desperate educational access, and a racial wealth gap. The post-World War II Veterans Program thus illustrated the shortcomings and difficulties of attempting to graft universal social programs on a political economy where the color line acted as a determinant in the distribution of resources and opportunities. Things would only get more challenging in the neoliberal era, when a reactionary counteroffensive began to frame public goods and services as fundamentally inefficient and in need of privatization and commodification. The attack on veterans' health care is a case in point. Originally organized on the National Health Service model, facilities being publicly owned, providers, public employees, resources allocated through comprehensive planning, and services free at the point of service to all eligible participants, the Veterans Health Administration is the largest integrated health system in the United States. Many of its vast workforce are veterans themselves, and many of those veterans are indeed union members, making it one of the largest unionized workplaces as well. It was designed to cater to the unique needs of veterans and has been a pioneer in diagnosing and treating veteran-specific diseases. It has also been a leader in developing systems of comprehensive and preventive care, focusing on treatment over a patient's entire life cycle. Numerous studies have demonstrated how VA care consistently produces better health outcomes than privatized health care at a lower cost. Through price negotiation and other administrative procedures, the VA pays about half as much as Medicare for drugs and other pharmaceutical products. Suzanne Gordon, Steve Early, and Jasper Craven, authors of Our Veterans, wrote that despite superior outcomes and cost effectiveness, VA healthcare was considered too big and too lucrative as a target to escape the attention of the free market ideologues and healthcare profiteers. President Dimondstein often sets it up this way when he talks about what the 4Ds are in relation to the privatization efforts. The 4Ds are defund and begin the process of slow strangulation, degrade the service so that people who can afford to do so begin to look for alternatives in the private sector, demonize the workers for the resultant failures, and then dismantle and privatize the service. And this is how privatization was eventually unleashed. Insufficient funding gave rise to long waiting lists, staffing shortages, and the occasional service meltdown. Detractors, often linked to right-wing and free market think tanks, pounced on every shortcoming and made sure their allies in Congress and the press blew them all out of proportion. As in education and Medicare, where the Medicare Advantage program is rapidly privatizing another cherished public good, once the services began to degrade, the privatizers called for an expansion of choice. That would allow veterans to seek care in the private sector. Beginning under the Obama administration with the Choice and Mission Acts and expanding greatly under the first Trump administration, veterans were in fact encouraged to use private care options that often had longer wait times and inferior care than the pillared government care. Dedicated VA workers were also demonized, as they continue to be, with union bargaining rights sharply curtailed under Trump 1.0 and 2.0. Workers are being scapegoated for problems beyond their control, causing demoralization, and staff turnover is exploding. In comes Project 2025. This really ups the ante on healthcare privatization. Within the VA, Project 2025 calls for hiring more private companies to perform disability medical examinations, increasing automation, using technology to perform most of the claims processing work, conduct more outreach to the private sector through senior leader engagement and industry conferences, and significantly reduce the VA workforce. To date, the privatized Veterans Community Care Program has seen an increase in costs from $8 billion to $31 billion over the past 10 years, consuming a third of the entire VA medical services budget. Private sector funding increased by 17%, while the VA public funding only increased by 5%. And to add insult to injury, there are no controls on cost and quality in the privatized community care program, unlike the public VA, which has internal reviews and is systematically reviewed by the VA Inspector General. When we look at the section in Project 2025 that's focused on Medicare, the similarities are there. Make Medicare Advantage the default enrollment option, drastically accelerating the number of people enrolled in Advantage HMOs, privatized Medicare, and it's administered by corporate insurers. That's important to remember. More people on Medicare Advantage will lead to more people being denied access to life-saving care and will dry up the Medicare Trust Fund through the waste, fraud, and abuse of overbilling to the tune of $83 to $140 billion a year. Project 2025 seeks to undo all the progress that has been made so that insurance corporations can go back to delaying and denying care to patients right when they need their health insurance the most. It also sets a threshold for how much they can spend, forcing patients to select lower cost treatments that will fail to keep them healthy and adequately address their healthcare needs. This puts Medicare on the path of moving from a defined benefit to a defined contribution program. This is what corporate violence looks like. Veterans are widely admired, and most Americans are deeply grateful for their service and their sacrifices. But military professionalism has taken its toll. The decline in the percent of veterans in the adult population has pretty much tracked the decline in the percentage of private sector union members. Manufactured scandals based almost entirely on anecdotes, falsehoods, and misrepresentation has had their intended effect as the VA's favorability has fallen while Main Street Democrats run for cover or attempt to triangulate the crisis by ceding ground to the free market critics. VA programs were originally conceived as universal public goods and services. As such, they share much of their DNA with other universal programs such as public education, Social Security, and Medicare. The assault on the VA is coming from the same place as the attacks on these other universal programs. At the same time as there are veteran advocates that view VA benefits as earned by the unique sacrifices that are made by veterans, there are sections of the labor movement who cling to their union advantage, negotiated healthcare benefits, despite overwhelming evidence that these programs are unsustainable and are actually undermining worker bargaining power. But the unique and special needs of Americans' veterans, coupled with the realization that bargaining for healthcare as if it's a negotiable benefit is a failed strategy, perfectly aligns our interests with each other to protect and expand public goods and services while striving to build secure lives for working class Americans. A wise Aboriginal woman once said, "If you come only to help me, you can go back home. But if you consider my struggle as part of your struggle for survival, then maybe we can work together." So let's work together. Our mutual survival literally depends upon it. Si se puede.
Well, that was great. We look forward to having you present at the Veterans for Peace annual convention in Las Vegas, July 25 and 26 and 27.
Thank you, Patrick.
Okay, next up, Mark Smith is an occupational therapist and president of the National Federation of Federal Employees Local 1, representing healthcare workers at the Veterans Health Administration. He also serves on the steering committee for the Federal Unionist Network.
Thanks so much, Patrick. Thanks a lot. So I'm a member of the steering committee of the Federal Unionist Network. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what that is in just a second. And just a note, I am an occupational therapist at the Veterans Health Administration, but I do not speak on behalf of the Department of Veterans Affairs, the United States government. My thoughts are my own. And so I just have to put out that disclaimer. I think Rose and Mark laid out the stakes of really effectively of, I think, what's going on right now. The public services, the federal government, all of these social and regulatory and sort of helpful functions of the federal government that millions of Americans rely on are under intense attack right now, right? The military industrial complex functions of the federal government, the carceral functions of the federal government are not under attack. Those functions are currently being funded to the tune of $1 trillion, and the social services and the public services are under attack. And so I'm part of a movement of federal workers, union members across unions, across agencies, across departments, a rank and file network of workers who are organizing to fight back. These attacks, we started getting organized a few years ago, but our organizing took on obviously a much more emergency character around the election, the Trump election, and then in January when the attacks started to come in full force. So part of the organizing that we've been doing has been to engage the public and the people who are served by our agencies. So Social Security, the Veterans Health Administration, Medicaid, Medicare, the Environmental Protection Agency, engaging the public in fighting back against these attacks on public services. And we have been doing that in a bunch of different ways, engaging rallies, town halls, organizing mass calls to get folks engaged in a couple of different campaigns. The first one being under the Save Our Services banner, and then the second campaign being under this banner of Let Us Work, right? So many of us civil servants and healthcare workers, park rangers, VA nurses, environmental protection workers, NIH scientists, Food and Drug Administration regulators, all of these kinds of folks are being, illegally terminated and fired and, cut in many different ways. So we are organizing to fight back. So I won't go too much into all of the attacks. I think Rose and Mark covered that quite well. But one of the ways that I think that Veterans for Peace and the Federal Unionist Network can work together is we are establishing local organizing hubs and organizing committees in many communities across America to get organized together with federal workers, with unions, with the public, and to organize and host rallies, to host town halls, to strategize together to fight back against many of these attacks on our public services, whether that is veterans healthcare, whether that's environmental protections and regulations, whether that's attacks on the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, all these kinds of things that help us out as workers and folks who benefit from public services. So that is one of the main ways that I think that we can work together. And I'm going to put some links here in the chat for how folks can connect, but I'm not going to talk too much because I think folks covered it pretty well. So I will see the rest of my time to the next speaker, John Braxton, and I encourage folks to go to those links. The first link is the Federal Unionist Network link. You can take a look at all of the sort of actions that we've been up to. The main campaign right now is to fight back against the reductions in force that are coming at the VA. Secretary Collins has a plan to cut 80,000 workers at the VA. That's across Veterans Healthcare Administration, the Veterans Benefits Administration, and the VCA. So we obviously want to stop that, as well as RIFs or reductions in force coming at the Environmental Protection Agency and the Social Security Administration. There's obviously many other agencies that provide critical protective and social functions across the federal government that are under attack as well, and we are organizing to stop those also. So if you go to that second website, savepublicservices.com, and that's the second link that I posted there in the chat, you can sign up and join our network. And so that will, wherever you are based, based on your zip code, you will be able to get in touch with our organizers all across the country. And I know that one of the strengths of Veterans for Peace is it's a membership-based organization with chapters all around the country. And so by going to that website, putting your information in there, you can get in touch with your local Federal Unionist Network organizing committee and get in touch so that you can start organizing to fight back against many of these attacks together. And so please do that, and look forward to organizing with y'all.
So we're looking forward to Federal Unionist Network coming to a neighborhood by us. Okay, John Braxton next is our last speaker. And by the way, Jim and I have discussed doing a follow-up for our next monthly Zoom, and it would be Tuesday, June the 17th. It's always the third Tuesday of the month, for us to continue this talk and try to get to organizing. So John Braxton is a longtime leader in the peace and labor movements. He was a draft resistor during the Vietnam War and served 16 and a half months in federal prison. He worked for 20 years in the reform movement within the Teamsters Union and helped prepare the 1997 national UPS strike. He has taught at the Community College of Philadelphia, where he was co-president of the American Federation of Teachers Union. He was a leading member of U.S. Labor Against the War. John, go for it.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks so much to the previous speakers, which were absolutely inspiring and informative, and I just appreciate everything that everybody has said so far, and look forward to a robust discussion after I do my presentation. I'm sure that a lot of people on this call have been on picket lines and heard the chant, no justice, no peace. And, you know, we tell the bosses and we tell the government, we'll be in the street and we're going to make it hard for them to rest until we win justice. And it's an important basis for our activism and our organizing. But it occurred to me in thinking about this that we can also, in some sense, turn that phrase around. If there's no peace, there's no justice. There is no justice in wars. Innocent people are always killed, wounded, and displaced, and affected for the rest of their lives if they survive. The only victors really are the profiteers in the war industry. And by the way, I think we got to get out of the habit of calling it the defense industry. We can talk about that, but I don't think it's really defending us. And I think everybody on this call knows that all of this, but I think we have to bring this consciousness to working class people everywhere. So my piece of this panel is aimed not so much at convincing you that we need a new set of priorities that de-emphasizes war and emphasizes programs that meet pressing social needs, because I think you know that. You wouldn't be here if you didn't know that, I'm pretty sure. But instead, what I hope we come away with is thinking of yourselves as organizers who will bring these ideas to working class people, along with all the other organizing that you're already doing, which I know is considerable. And so what I want to do is to show you a few tools for what we've been doing in what we call Veterans and Labor for Sensible Priorities. And I really loved the quotes that we've heard already. And I also want to start off with a couple of quotes. One is, "We must see now that the evils of racism, economic exploitation, and militarism are all tied together, and you can't get rid of one without getting rid of the other." Martin Luther King, as many of you know, in his last year, he came out against the war in Vietnam. He was sharply criticized by many of his best allies, saying, you know, we got to stick to civil rights. We got to stick to civil rights. And he said, no, they're all linked together. And another quote from Martin Luther King: a nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. So strong statements from someone who most of the country views as a civil rights leader, but he was much bigger than a civil rights leader. And of course, probably everybody on this call knows that the week that he was assassinated, he was in Memphis, Tennessee, defending a sanitation workers' strike. So he also understood the importance of labor in all this. In September of 2023, a few of us came together under the umbrella of Veterans for Peace to begin a campaign that we call Veterans and Labor for Sensible Priorities. And the heart of this campaign is to build labor support for a bill called the People Over the Pentagon Act, which would cut $100 billion, that's billion with a B, $100 billion from Pentagon spending and make that money available for things like healthcare, education, veterans benefits, dealing with climate change, and all those other programs that Martin Luther King would have called programs of social uplift. It was put forward by Barbara Lee, who you may know was the one congressperson who wouldn't go along with the war on terror. She said this was a blank check for the future, and I think a lot of people recognize now that she was right, and they wish. I remember Bernie Sanders saying at one point when he was criticized for voting for that resolution, he just said Barbara Lee was right, and if only other politicians could recognize when they make a mistake. It's not easy to get unions and other labor groups to pay attention to militarism, and that's very understandable. The labor movement's fighting for survival. And many labor leaders understandably feel they are spending all their energy just to try to keep their unions afloat without trying to tackle something like militarism. So it's very understandable, and it's particularly hard for unions to pay attention to this when we don't have a war where U.S. troops are in massive numbers actively involved. But I think King was right that, again, we must now see, I can't put it any better, that the evils of racism, economic exploitation, and militarism are all tied together. You can't get rid of one without getting rid of the other. So how do we get labor on board with demilitarizing our foreign policy? I think it's difficult, but not impossible. I'll go back to what Mark Dimondstein said. It's not hopeless. Difficult, but not impossible. During the Iraq War, a bottom-up movement within labor convinced the National AFL-CIO to oppose the war and call for bringing the war dollars home. Mark Dimondstein was an important part of that, and a group called U.S. Labor Against the War was key to that grassroots bubbling up that eventually forced a change in policy in the AFL-CIO that had been a long time coming. Some of us used to call the AFL-CIO the AFL-CIA, and there's a lot of history we could talk about there. But it did move beyond that. So can we do it now? Can we our goal is to get the labor movement to fight for demilitarization, even when we, fortunately, don't have a war involving massive numbers of U.S. troops. Of course, we do have massive numbers of U.S. troops scattered all around the globe, some of which are in combat that probably we won't even ever find out about. So how do we get the labor movement on board? I will say, again, Carl Rosen, who's on the call, Mark Dimondstein, and others on the call have played a really important role in the labor network for ceasefire. And so that's an important step in the right direction that we have to recognize. It's focused on Gaza, which is a very appropriate place to focus, but it's an indication that the labor movement can move in this direction. And over the past, what, I guess about 19 months or so that we've been working on building labor support for Barbara Lee's bill, the People Over the Pentagon Act, we've gotten 51 labor organizations to sign on and endorse that bill. And they vary from, of course, the Postal Workers Union and United Electrical Workers Union. It's not a coincidence that Mark Dimondstein and Carl Rosen are both on this call. And so some national unions, to a lot of American Federation of Teachers locals, a bunch of American Postal Workers Unions locals have recently signed on. But we have a lot of different labor unions involved in this. And so, and I've been talking to a lot of these groups, and when I approach a union on this issue, I ask the members and leaders, which of the U.S. wars in the last 60 years actually solved a problem? So which one of those wars in the last 60 years actually solved a problem? Was it Vietnam? Well, Eisenhower, again, of all people, Eisenhower said in his memoirs that if an election had been held, Ho Chi Minh would have won 80% of the votes. So Vietnam was not about democracy. How about Iraq? Well, it turns out there weren't any weapons of mass destruction. What a surprise. So we didn't solve that problem. It was was a problem that didn't exist, and we didn't solve it. And we now know it was more about access to oil and geopolitics than anything else. What about Afghanistan? 20 years of war, $8 trillion between Iraq and Afghanistan. We're going to be paying for that the rest of our lives. And all of the people that were killed that lived in those countries, and the thousands of U.S. soldiers that were killed and wounded and come back with PSD and so forth. So I think we can argue that none of those wars actually defended working class people in the U.S. And also we know it's working class people that fought and died in those wars, and it's working class people that pay for those wars. The billionaires don't pay for them, and they find a way to not fight in them, right? And so then I ask people, so how many of you pay taxes to the federal government? Well, we're not talking to billionaires here, so they all say, yeah, unfortunately, I pay taxes. And how much of your taxes do you think go to war? And people are pretty shocked to find out that it's a lot higher than they think. And I want to share my screen here for just a second and show you. Let's see. Oh, I just covered up the share button, so I can't click on it. Hang on a second. Okay. So I'm sharing my screen. And that's not what you need to see, but so here is this big pie chart. And I think if you look at it, you can see, without having to study it real carefully or read the fine print, you can see that this big dark blue area over here, that's a little more than 50% of the pie, that's what goes to the Pentagon. And whatever little sliver you're interested in over here, whether it's education or veterans benefits or international affairs or energy and the environment, all of those are getting starved. And why are they getting starved? They're getting starved because the Pentagon is soaking up all of this. Again, that goes back to Eisenhower's quote that Mark Dimondstein put forward. So, I ask people, is that what you would put forward as your priorities? If you were president, if you were king, we have a president king now, would you set it up that way? And basically nobody wants to do that. So we try to get people thinking about that. And then I say to them, so how much money do we spend Oh, that's not what I want to show you, so hang on again a second. Um, that's not, how much do we actually spend? Uh, so here is another quick chart, a quick graph. Coming up, here we go. Um, that shows on the right-hand side, this big red column here shows $877 billion. That was a recent year of the Pentagon budget. It's bigger now. And over here are the next 10 countries combined, China, Russia on the top, and so forth. By the way, most of those are our so-called allies. So it's not like they're all our adversaries. So we spend more than the next 10 put together. And uh, and and we spend twice as much as China and Russia, our supposed adversaries, put together, spend twice as much. So if we cut the Pentagon spending by $100 billion, which is only about 11%, it's a big number, but it's only 11%, that would still leave us spending more. You can see that dotted line across there than the next 10 put together. So this is getting people trying to think about, do we really have to spend that much money in order to defend our borders? And as Mark pointed out, here's one particular list of all the different things that we could do with that money, that $100 billion, if we saved it and used it for programs of social uplift, as Martin Luther King would say. And one of those, of course, would have to do with climate change. And not incidentally, the Pentagon is the largest user of fossil fuels in the world, and therefore the largest single contributor to greenhouse gases in the world. So I think if King were alive today, he would add climate change to those other three issues that he said we can't tackle one of them without tackling them all. By the way, it's important to note that less than a third of the Pentagon's money actually goes to soldiers. And the People Over the Pentagon Act explicitly does not allow that cutback to allow cutbacks in either soldiers' pay or benefits for soldiers or veterans. So more than half of that Pentagon budget, this big red column again, goes to profit-seeking corporations. And I learned recently the average of the top 5 CEOs' pay of the top 5 military contractors, they each one averaged $50 million a year in compensation. So there's a lot of places that we can save money and still secure our borders if that's what we're concerned about. If we're concerned about defense. And by the way, that pie chart had at the top that we have 700 military bases scattered around the world. That's really expensive. And it's not about defending us, it's about offense, as our recent wars have shown. And then the other little piece of information that's really important is the Pentagon has failed 7 consecutive audits. They've never passed an audit. Those of you that are in unions know that unions get audited all the time, and you don't stay in office very long if you fail an audit, but not the Pentagon. So they can't even tell us where all that money's going. So the bottom line to all this is that excessive military spending is not in the interests of working class people. But I don't think that's in people's consciousness mostly. So that's a job we need to do to kind of change the way people think about it when they think of the Pentagon spending. So I mentioned in the past bunch of 21 months or so, we've got 51 labor organizations signed on to the People Over the Pentagon Act, and includes AFSCME, people in AFSCME, SEIU, American Federation of Communication Workers of America, Unite Here, chapters of what the AFL-CIO calls constituency groups. So like Coalition of Black Trade Unionists, retiree groups, Asian and Pacific American Labor Alliance, different local labor support coalitions. So, and this is a long-term campaign. Uh, I don't think anybody on this call thinks we're going to get it through this Congress. But if we don't start working on it now, when do we start working on it? So we're not going to get single payer through this Congress. I'm pretty sure Rose agrees with me on that. But that doesn't mean we don't bring up single payer. It's really important. And how long did it take for the Civil Rights Act to get passed and so forth? So our idea is to reach out to every local union, every labor group that we can get hold of and ask them to endorse this bill. And also to then, if they endorse it, to ask them to pass that endorsement on to their regional and national bodies. So their central labor councils or their national unions, and get them to support these really very reasonable, sensible priorities. And so I'm about to wrap up. I think that's my time. But let me just say, we have a thing where you can sign up so that we make sure that we're in touch with you. So if you haven't yet signed the open letter, this is for individuals supporting the People Over the Pentagon Act. Here is the URL for that, and I'll put it in the chat. Or maybe while I'm talking, somebody else can put it in the chat, but when I'm done, I'll put it in the chat if nobody else has. And so it'd be great if everybody on this call could sign on to that so we know how to get hold of you. Don't worry, we're not the kind of organization that sends you a fund appeal every week. We're all volunteer, so we do very rare fund appeals. And then consider contacting local unions in your vicinity. I can send you a list of all the unions that have signed on and other labor organizations that have signed on. Consider going to any one of those and asking them to sign on to the bill. We have a model resolution. We actually have two model resolutions. We have one that's nice and detailed and has all the whereases about this rationale for this, and then the resolution itself. And then we have one that's mostly just resolved, which basically just says we endorse the concept of cutting the Pentagon budget, and the People Over the Pentagon Act is one of those important bills, and we will pass this on to our national and regional bodies, and we give permission to be listed publicly, as is the border of the bill. So all these tools are available to you, and we'd really love for you to kind of make them your own, pick them up and run with it. And of course, if you get a local of any kind to a labor-related organization of any kind to endorse this bill, let us know. The last thing we need are people endorsing the bill and we don't hear about it. Really appreciate your listening to this and looking forward to working with you all on all of these things that the previous speakers and I have been talking about. Thank you so much.